Okay guys, we're here today doing a little maintenance on the Rzr. Doing the front end. Got ball joints, front bearings, front axle we're replacing. I've already finished the passenger side. Let's make sure I know how to do it before I made a video of it. Let me kind of show you what we got going on for the driver's side. Okay, I suspected it was the lower ball joint was the bad one. I wiggle the tire. It's hard to do one-handed. But the bottom ball joint is loose on the driver's side. The rest of them are okay. I figure if one's bad, then the rest aren't too far behind. And I didn't like how much these front axles, they don't move too much when it's jacked up. They have quite a bit of play. But then after putting the new axle in, it's kind of the same on a new axle. So I think this is kind of how the differential is designed. Let me kind of go over what we're going to do, what steps we take, and then I'll just kind of update you as we go. First thing, pull the tire off. Need to undo this tie rod while it's still bolted to the ball joints, just so it holds the hub a little straighter. And then we'll undo this bolt so we can pull the shock up out of the way. Brake caliper comes off, ball joints come off, and then once we get the hub out, we press out and press in the new bearing. Then we got to press out both ball joints and press new ones in, and then pull the axle out, which on the other side was the tricky part because it came apart in this joint here. So I ended up having to weld my slide hammer to this outer collar to even get a hold of anything to pull it out. Okay, first thing we want to do before you, after you take the wheel off, is you want to pull this center nut off of the hub. It's torqued to 180 foot-pounds, so you kind of need the brakes pressed on. I got a spare tire underneath there for a jack stand in case it falls, but it shouldn't be underneath the machine at all, so it should be okay. But you want to take this off before you do anything else, because even with an impact, it won't hardly take it off because it's torqued to 180 foot-pounds. But get the cotter key out, loosen that up, and then you can start disassembling everything else. Okay, the brake caliper just has two bolts. They're 16mm sockets. Pull the brake caliper off. I will need to zip tie that out of the way when we get a little farther. The tie rod end is an 18mm, but you probably need to use a wrench after you get it broke loose, because this piece here doesn't have room for a socket to get in there. Okay, I've seen videos where you can just put a hammer here and then hit it with another hammer and it'll break loose. I haven't had any luck with that. So what I ended up doing is getting an old nut that's damaged. And just threading it on is just so you hit that and then do the same thing. Put your one hammer against here, and then I just hit it with a dead blow hammer. We just end up replacing this so we don't mess up these threads on this. And it comes out. Swing it over out of the way. Now we can pull the ball joints off and the front shock tower off and get everything up out of the way to pull the axle. Okay, got the hub off. The shock and upper arm kind of pulled up out of the way so we can get the axle out. There's a correction, the bolts for the brake caliper are 15mm, which is what most of the suspension components are, except for the tie rod one is 18. And for removing this axle, typically you want to push it in and then just use it as its own slide hammer, and hopefully it pops out. I sprayed it with some penetrating oil last week when I was working on the front or the other side. Hopefully I don't have the same troubles, but we'll see if it comes out. Okay, just like the other side, the outer shaft pulled out of the inner CV boot, so now there's nothing to grip onto. If you're lucky, you can get some vice grips to grab onto that with the slide hammer and pull it out, but mine don't have good enough teeth for that. So what I end up doing on the other side, I made this bracket for my slide hammer, and then just welding it directly to that, and then it was able to pop free. So we'll do the same thing on this side and hope it comes out. Then when we put it back together, we're going to put some anti-seize on there. That way it'll come apart a little easier next time. Okay, after lots and lots hard work, it finally came out. I think half the problem is my slide hammer is small. It's only like a 2-pounder, probably more like a 5. It works, it was just slow. I got all in there, cleaned out for the new one. Okay, so for pressing these bearings out, we have this sleeve that goes over the top to allow room to press this up. And this is just a cup the tool takes. And then it goes over top. And then that'll loosen up, and then it has this base plate that'll press the ball joint out. Can't really film very well and hold it, but that's the basic principle. Let me get it all put together, and I'll show you the starting point, and it's just a matter of tightening it down. Okay, I got it all on there. You want to make sure this is stayed squared on the top, so as you tighten it up, it'll press the ball joint out. I guess I better pull that snap ring off before I try too hard. But it's just on the bottom here. Some snap ring pliers will come right off. Okay, there's the old one out. It's not in bad shape, but this lower one is the bad one that I really want to replace. So while I'm taking it apart, I figured I might as well do them all. As you're pressing this up, it'll have a tendency to kind of kink. You want to try to hold it as straight as possible, but it'll eventually pop out of there. The ones I'm replacing with are these Tusk adjustables. As you can see, they only have one little notch for what holds them on, so you got to make sure that is pointed inwards. So that's where it hooks onto the knuckle. They do have a little bit of play in them, so you'll be able to get it off or twist it and get them lined up if you need to. And then putting them back on is basically the same, except you put this piece on the bottom so that as you're pressing in, the ball joint has somewhere to go down. So we'll press this one in, and then we'll do the bottom one. Okay, we got it all lined up. This has a hole all the way up through it to let the ball joint go in. It's only got to press in there about a ½ inch or so. So we'll tighten it down and try to get it lined up as straight as possible so it goes in square. This Tusk one has a little greaser at the top. I ended up taking that little nut off just so we don't crush it with this press. And we'll tighten it back in once it's pressed in there. Okay, got it pressed in there. Snap ring back in there. Then this has this little nut I put back in. I think it's just so you can put grease down in there. Okay, here's the upper ball joint. You can see it's still got some grease and stuff in there. Pulled the boot off just to look at it. And then here's the lower one. And it has no grease left. And so it was just basically metal on metal down inside there. I guess that's why these ones, you can take this off and put grease in there and try to keep them a little more greased, and then they should last a little better, hopefully. And you can see a little bit taller on the top with that extra piece. Okay, last thing we got to do is pull the snap ring off and press this bearing out and press the new one in. So let me pull this snap ring out, and then I'll show you my tool that I use for pressing the bearings out. Might try the air chisel attachment on this one. With the hammer worked, it was just a little slow and kind of beat the bearing up a little bit. Okay, so here's half the bearing. And this is the side we need to press from, so I need the other half of it off, but it's stuck on the spindle. So I'm going to try to get it off without running it too much, so I have something to press against to press this other side off. Okay, got my air chisel hooked together. Now let's see how it works. Got the right size so it fits the whole bearing. Okay, we got the slide hammer on here, or the chisel bit on there, the bearing press. Hopefully it'll have enough air in it to work. Let's see if I get any moving, if we're going to have to use the hammer. Okay, it's moving a little bit. I think the hammer might be a little faster, but this is probably a little more precise. So we'll keep going. Okay, old bearing out, new bearing in. This is an All Balls brand. I ended up having to finish that other one off with a regular hammer. I think this pneumatic one just don't quite have enough power. But we're going to try to put it in a little bit and hopefully can fine tune it with the hammer if we have to. It'll be two-handed to hold it still. Okay, that went in like a piece of cake with the pneumatic one once I got it square. One thing to worry about is this nut, and I've tightened it really good. It just comes loose with vibration. Okay, got the snap ring back in. Okay, for my front axle, I went with an All Ball 6-ball heavy duty. Probably if you're doing more heavy duty riding or racing, probably go with the 8-ball. But I'm going to put some anti-seize on these threads, or on the splines, where they reassemble, so it'll come out easier next time and I won't have as many issues, I hope. Okay, got my anti-seize on there. Hope it's not too much. We'll slide this back in. Okay, got the shock bolt back on. Ball joints back on, tightened. Tie rod's on and tightened. I haven't torqued anything yet. Right now I've got my limiting strap puts me to there, so I gotta lift this suspension back up there and get that limiting strap on before I put the nut on. Okay, I just took a ratchet strap up to the frame, then the lower arm, lift it up to get to here. So now when I go with the strap, it won't bottom out my shock. Okay, put the washer on. New castle nut. I put a little dollop of anti-seize on that because these torque to 180 foot-pounds, which seems pretty high. But what I ended up doing was torquing it to 180 and then just backing it off to the hole, whatever it takes to get to the next hole for your cotter pin. It takes quite a bit to get to 180. What I ended up having to do is put the brake caliper back on, wedge something on the brake pedal, otherwise you just spin the hub. I tried having the key on in 4-wheel drive in gear and it would still just free spin. I found the brake to be the best option. Okay guys, I'm gonna roll everything back together. I'm going to torque everything down to the proper specs. I'll put the specs in the description of this video. That way you don't have to sit and watch everything. You can just read the torque specs if you know what you're doing. And it'll be a good resource to have all the specs you need.